This is the Variety Sports Network, created for the fans, by the fans. Now to your host of tonight's show.
Hey, welcome back, everybody, to Saturday Showdown. Caleb, had a couple weeks off, had some personal issues, man. Still, got to watch football and everything. Really excited to be back with you, man. Caleb, how you doing?
Doing pretty good. Like you said, we had, weeks off. You were doing some personal issues, some good R&R. Good to be back and refreshed and ready to talk some more college football.
Yep, very happy to be here with you. Let's touch base with you real quick. How's Woo Pig Weekly been going?
Doing pretty good. This week was a good week to where not having to talk about a loss finally. And
there you go.
So it always makes it easier.
Yeah. So, obviously we know that's your team. Can you give us some thoughts on the team this year? I know it's not been exactly what you expected coming into the year. I personally thought you guys would, maybe contend for a potential spot in the SEC, conference championship, but it's been a tough year. Do you want to touch on some things that you think are, keeping the team from that next level?
Yeah, so I actually was in Gainesville this weekend for the game. Got to travel down to the Swamp. It was a cool experience to be down there and, go to a visiting stadium and not only be there, but be there for the first ever win in the Swamp for Arkansas. But, yeah, like you said, I think a lot of people had high expectations this season, just with KJ returning, Rocket returning, familiarity in your offensive coordinator coming back, not coming back, but a guy that has worked with Pittman before. And I think it all turned out Enos was trying to make KJ something he's not, and that was a pocket passer. He does better open in space and, more on the run style play. And so I think as the season went on, those struggles never got better, whereas like you'd think maybe one or two games in, a little bit of a change of offensive style, sure, but when you go on a big 6-game stretch where you don't look good, you don't look like things are flowing smoothly, changes had to be made, and that's what happened. And now our interim OC, Kenny Guyton, a former Buckeye of yours, taking the reins for OC. It seems like there's just a different life in this team this weekend. They seem more energetic, just more bought in, and who knows? Maybe he's the answer. He's got a few more games to, in a sense, audition. So we'll see how that goes the rest of the season. But I've liked what I saw Saturday. You can't just fix bad offensive line play in 1 week. But I think from a play calling standpoint, we called a much better game that suited KJ and Rocket and benefited them, and that's what helped us get the win this weekend.
Hey, anytime you can beat Florida, it's a nice win. So, props to you guys. You guys got a tough game against Auburn. Let me get your thoughts on that before we move on. And then, quick shout out to Giovanni Campus. Appreciate you stopping in. I love the Tupac and Biggie background. But go ahead, Caleb. Tell us your thoughts on the Auburn game.
Yeah, I will say we just need to build off some momentum from this game. A big win for Arkansas, and to come in and be able to capitalize on that. I think that's just big. And Auburn's a team that in the previous seasons, there's been some interesting games with them just from a standpoint of some of those have been decided by the referees and not just the play of football. Mm-hmm. You had a few years ago, Bo Nix, that had a spike that was a fumble, but it was called as, spike for the way he spiked the ball. It was a backwards, so it was technically a fumble, and they blew the play dead due to without letting everything progress. So therefore, even though we recovered the ball, the play was called dead, so it didn't count. And so it'll be interesting to see with a new coach over there, Hugh Freeze back from Liberty, has been around the SEC before, but I think if we can capitalize on some momentum, it's a home game for Arkansas back at home for the Final Three, and I think it's a very winnable game. If our defense can keep up how they've been this season, and then our offense can keep improving from last week. I think it should be a good game, and I like Arkansas in this one.
Okay, that's what I was getting. I was going to ask you to close that out. You got Arkansas back-to-back wins. Little momentum here to close out the year. I like it. Caleb, let's get into some topical conversation here that's going on around college football. We'd be remiss not to comment on this because it's been in our face for the last few weeks. Give me your thoughts on the Michigan situation, because a few episodes ago, you and I thought this wasn't anything crazy and not really a big deal. We thought, hey, it seems like normal gamesmanship, normal scouting, trying to get an upper hand. We didn't think a lot about it. Have your thoughts changed at all a couple weeks later?
At this point, it's honestly, I don't really know what to think with just everything going around, fingers being pointed everywhere. And it's just interesting to see what the ruling is going to be. And I saw a clip from Stephen A. Smith today that I kind of agree with, and I feel like it's fair, is he made the point of Michigan shouldn't be allowed to have a college football playoff spot until a ruling has been made on this issue, because that's not fair to another team. Say they don't get in a playoff spot, but then they come out later and say, oh yeah, Michigan is guilty. We're going to, take away their wins, whatever it may be. And then you've ultimately, hurt another team's chance at being in the playoffs.
I like that take from Stephen A. Because, like I said, if Washington or Florida State get left out, that's a lost year, for those kind of programs. Washington, who's moving over to the Big Ten, you don't know if they're going to be able to win the Big Ten next year or win their conference. So I think that's a great point. But like JC said here, can they keep Michigan out, or are they going to suspend Harbaugh? Crazy. What I saw most recently was potentially a 2-game suspension for Harbaugh. We were supposed to get that ruling today. We did not get it. It will be interesting to see if it comes out Friday, giving Michigan only 1 day to, quote unquote, prepare without their coach. But we saw early in the year, they seem to be okay without Harbaugh there. It's not like he's going to, and then when, they're going to file the injunction, obviously. So he's going to coach against Ohio State and potentially the Big Ten championship. I would like some more clarity on the situation. It's fun to poke fun at Michigan fans, but nobody really knows what we're actually gonna get as a result of all this.
I was about to say, the only thing that's really been done is I believe they fired that one Michigan staffer, but after that, it's like, where do you go from there? Because if he was the one that was kind of doing all this, like, how do you go about disciplining the rest of the team and university?
I just I also don't like. I know Michigan people. You got to defend your own, but the finger pointing has really kind of turned me off, because all of a sudden now, oh, no, out. Now everybody's doing it. If you knew this already, why didn't you say anything? Like, it just feels like a finger pointing situation by Michigan now that they've gotten caught. And it just seems like it's too late to blow the whistle on other people.
Yeah, almost
just because you're exactly. I'm going to bring down Ohio State. I'm going to bring down Rutgers. I'm going to bring down some of these other teams while we're going down. I don't love that part of it. I do get, human nature, but it just seems a little late in the process to be blaming other teams and trying to get other people in trouble. So obviously, Michigan, very talented. We'll talk about them in a little bit when we get into the college football playoff. Caleb, let's talk about another Caleb. Caleb Williams and the USC Trojans. I had higher expectations for them as a team. I do think, all things considered, Caleb Williams is having a good year. It's just a lot to ask of a guy when there's just no defense at all to carry a team every single game. Do you think this season has hurt his stock at all?
I think it's an interesting point to look at. Like you said, you can't expect one guy to carry an entire defensive unit, but on the other hand, he has had some struggles this year. I think, he's not necessarily exposed, but maybe some weaknesses has been found in his game with when he's had to step up and kind of take more of that pressure with a lack of defense to put more points on the board. You know, you saw that game against Notre Dame where he got picked off several times in that game, and it almost like that game was the breaking point, and they went on to lose to Utah, Washington. Now they got a tough matchup against Oregon this week.
Right. Yeah, that's a good point too. I just when I watched USC play, I find him trying to do too much because I feel like he has so much pressure on him that he knows if it's not a home run that they're going to lose the game. Do you think that is a fair take on him? Because when I see it, I think he's pressing because he knows if the other team gets the ball back without 7 points, they're just going to, get poured on the other end. It's a very interesting situation because again, he's still second in college football in passing yards. He's still, got, let's see, let me get his touchdowns too. He's still got 24 passing 28 passing touchdowns, only 4 interceptions. And we've seen him take some more risks, like I've mentioned. And I think 3 of those came against Notre Dame, if I'm not mistaken. That's pretty damn solid for a guy who we think is pressing and trying to do probably too much. What are your thoughts on his actual numbers?
Yeah, I think overall, he's still performing well. He's still a very talented quarterback. Like you said, when he went up against a super tough defense and his own defense couldn't help. I mean, you look at the stats from that Notre Dame game. He only threw for 199 yards, 1 touchdown, and 3 interceptions.
Yeah.
So I think if he decides to go in the league this year or come back, that's to be seen. I know he's depending on who has that first pick, he might be encouraged to come back.
Right.
I think the big thing he's got to look at is if he does whatever his future holds. If he comes back, he's going to have to really go to Lincoln Riley and say, "Hey, you've got to give me a defense to help me out," or, I mean, go pro at that point. Because if you're going to come back and have to,
I just couldn't imagine him doing this again.
Yeah,
struggling like I know some people were making fun of him for being emotional in the crowd with his parents. To me, that was him being upset that they couldn't win the game. Like he couldn't do enough to win. I thought that was more of that kind of emotion than, him being a baby or something like. I thought that was unfair to him. It just happens sometimes. You don't know when you're going to get hit with that wave of emotion and just, have to let it out. I don't think he should come back. I think he's the surefire number 1 pick. I think he's the best quarterback in the country still. I know other quarterbacks, Penix and some of these other guys are doing a little bit more, but they also have more around them as a whole. So I think, if you threw Caleb Williams on Washington, I think it's the same thing. Could you imagine Caleb Williams on Ohio State? Like there's just, I think he's still that kind of player. USC has just done such a poor job of building a roster. I mean, Lincoln Riley has done this twice now. He did the same crap at Oklahoma. They had decent individual players, but they never had a unit. And that was the knock on him at Oklahoma.
Yeah, they're always involved in those shootout games because, they could put up a lot of points, but I also had no defense to go along with that.
And then he finally fired his buddy, the defensive coordinator, after way too long. It's just, I think this is a complete failure, and you're seeing a guy try to make up for everybody else's small failures that lead up to a big failure. So, what are they, 7-3 still? Or
7-3.
It's not a total failure, but when you're talking about them potentially winning the Pac-12 to start the year, it definitely is a letdown. So, last thing in our opening remarks here, let's talk. Quinn Ewers comes back to Texas. Now, we spoke briefly about this before we jumped on the mic. Texas goes 2-0 without him. Do you stay with the hot hand against TCU and maybe give them 1 extra week, or are you good with Ewers coming back against TCU in a game they should win either way?
I think you go back to Ewers. I mean, like you said, it's a 2-game stretch. They had a win against BYU, which is fair that, BYU is not having the greatest year, their first year in the Big 12, so easy win there. But then you look at the game against Kansas State, a very talented team that came right down to it. Not to say that it would have been much different with Ewers, but you've got to feel like you have more confidence in a player that has been in that position before. He went in and took down a top Alabama team, and you've just got to think he's talented enough that you're playing a guy that was his first 2 starts at Texas ever. So
Right.
an experienced guy, I'm going back to the experience and, bringing him back. I am being careful with him with, it could be easy enough to re-injure something. But
right. I just thought, and this is, I just wanted to be the other side of the coin to your earlier point. Against the TCU team, I don't know if I need him. I would rather potentially have him 100% for, they've got Iowa State next week, the 8 p.m. game, and Texas Tech in a rivalry game to close out the year. Maybe save him for those games, but I wouldn't say either of those games are really in doubt for them. I just want him to be healthy in that potential rematch with Oklahoma. I think that's got to be the goal. So I would, if I get up a couple touchdowns, I'm probably gonna, maybe look to get him onto the bench and, stay as healthy as you can, especially this time of year. Ewers, he's a gamer, man. He will go out there and play, but those are the guys you got to protect more. Usually, is the guys who are going to play no matter what. So Texas, obviously, I mean, looking at their next 3 games at TCU, at Iowa State, at Texas, or versus Texas Tech, you see them going 3-0 in those games, right?
Yeah. I mean, it's one of those things where, like you said, if they go up a few scores, you may pull him because, they're sitting, he's at 8-1. They win out these 3 games and make it to the conference championship game. They're easily right up there for a college football playoff spot. So,
yeah,
I mean,
I'm with
like
you on
you
that.
said, you don't risk a guy that really has gotten you to that point, and just to have him still playing and win the game big.
Right. Next, why is there's like a reverb? Let me see. Okay, there it's gone. Sorry, guys. Yeah, no, I'm with you on that. And I meant Oklahoma State, not Oklahoma. Sorry about that. They are the second in the Big 12 right now. Caleb, let's move on to the college football playoff. We haven't gotten a chance to really sit down and hammer this out. What are your thoughts on the current 4 in the college football playoff?
Yeah, I think it's accurate. You look at the top undefeated teams, the only one kind of outside looking in per se is Washington, who is undefeated. You've got really 5 great teams right there that are all sitting at 9-0. And I mean, if you look at it at the end of the day, by the time you get to playoff time, both Ohio State and Michigan are not going to be both in the rankings, I don't think. Especially if there's an undefeated team like Washington sitting there waiting for one of those teams to lose to jump right into that mix.
Yep, I'm with you on that for sure. Question for you, since are you okay with the 4 that are in the top 4? Maybe a different order, but are you good with those 4?
For now, yes. I'm good with that order. Or that
Okay.
Those 4.
And then obviously Washington's at 5. Okay, 6, 7, and 8. Do you think Oregon's the best of the rest out of those teams that you've seen this year?
That is tough, but I would have to go right now. I love Bo Nix and how he's playing this season. He's got 25 touchdowns to 2 interceptions, nearly 3,000 yards passing. And this Ducks team looks like they have, that was a last-minute loss to Washington. So that easy could have went the other way, and we're talking about an undefeated Oregon team. So I think out of those 3, I feel like Oregon has the most talent and most well-rounded team.
Okay, I think that's fair. Question then, another question for you. Do you think the Washington win over Oregon is the best win this season, or do you think Texas's win over Alabama is the best win this season?
Yeah, that's a tough one. Both of those teams, you look at what they've each done. Alabama isn't its powerhouse that it normally is. So not to take away from Texas, but it's not, to me, it's still a good win that they went into Tuscaloosa and got the win. But this isn't your normal dominant Alabama team that they went in and beat. So to me, I've got to go with the win of Oregon over Washington just because those are two full strength, powerful teams going at it that, it came down to a field goal game. And I think that's what you got to look at.
Okay, I agree with that also. I think the Oregon win for Washington is the best win I've seen this year. One more question. Ole Miss. Is this the best Ole Miss team you in recent memory for you? Because I've been pretty impressed with them. I know they had the hiccup against Alabama where they just couldn't get going on offense. But overall, is this the best Ole Miss team you've seen in recent time?
I would have to say so. Kiffin's got some things going down there, and it's going to be interesting how it all shakes out the rest of the season for who's going to get that West spot in the championship game against Georgia. Because if you just look at schedules that are left, Alabama has Kentucky, Tennessee, Chattanooga, and Auburn. So I could easily see them finishing the season 11-1.
Right.
And then Ole Miss's schedule they got left, they play Georgia this week.
It's a massive game.
That's a big game for them if they want to stay in the opportunity to win the West and take on Georgia. It would be playing them a second time. And then you got UL Monroe and Mississippi State. That's 2 wins right there. So the toughest game left is that Georgia game this weekend, and I think it holds a lot of weight for what could happen in the conference, whether you see an Alabama-Georgia rematch again or if you see Ole Miss potentially in that spot for
that's
the West.
Okay, question for you. If Ole Miss beats Georgia this year, do they move up to 4? Like next week's rankings, do they move into the top 5 or top 4?
I don't think so.
Oh, that's tough.
That's tough, but I feel like I couldn't justify moving them up when you have an undefeated Washington team sitting there at 5.
But that would be the best win anybody's had, though. Beating Georgia would be the best win possible based on the current college football rankings. Right.
That is fair. That's almost a tough call because you'd have a 9-1.
Then do you think they moved to 5 right outside looking in? Because they would still have the same 1 loss as Oregon and everybody else, but they'd have a win over Georgia.
I could see that more plausible.
Do you think they jump everybody else?
Yeah, I could see that happening more than them just jumping right into the top 4.
Okay, because I think that scenario is very interesting because they still, unless Bama loses to somebody, they still wouldn't jump Bama in the SEC bowl or conference championship
because so Bama has a tiebreaker.
Exactly. I think that's a very interesting scenario. I more than likely will pick Georgia, but I just think that would be fun kind of chaos here towards the end of the year that really would make some things interesting. Caleb, before we move on, let's hear your college football 4 in order.
In order, I'm still a proponent. I personally would still have Georgia at 1.
Okay.
And then Ohio State, and then just the rest of the way down, just flip your top 2. And that would be how I would have it right now.
So is there anything in you that wants to put Washington at 4 instead of Florida State?
It's close. Just because, like we talked about, Washington has that big win over Oregon. But you've got to look at what Florida State's done as well. They've had some decent wins. They went on the road, even though they're not their normal selves. They went on the road and beat a Clemson team at home.
Mm-hmm.
They took down LSU at the beginning of the year. And then they've also beaten a ranked Duke team. And
without their quarterback.
Yeah.
No,
So
I think Florida State deserves that spot, but I think that Washington and Florida State margin is razor thin. I give a lot of credence to that Oregon win. I think that Oregon win is better than the LSU win. So it's very close for me. FSU is better, maybe. I mean, maybe they are, maybe they aren't. That would be a hell of a game to watch, though, if we could get a Florida State versus Washington potentially, in a bowl game if something doesn't go right or something like that. That's a hell of a matchup to watch. Caleb, let's move on. This weekend we have some really important games. We just mentioned one. What is your game of the weekend besides the Georgia and Ole Miss game?
Oh, that's a good. There's a lot of good games this weekend. I think the interesting game for me, if you look at it, I'm going to stay in the SEC, and I think you've got to go with Tennessee and Missouri. That's a top 25 matchup.
Yes,
I didn't think I'd be saying that, but it is, and I think it could hold some weight in the East as well, because you look at both these teams sitting at 7-2.
Mm-hmm.
If something happens to Georgia, like you said, a big game, that's one loss for Georgia, but who knows what could happen the rest of the season for them.
No, that's a good point. I'm going to stay up north where I'm at, and a lot of important things can happen. The Michigan versus Penn State game, 3 versus 10. This is a very important game for both. It's a more important game for Penn State in their program, in my opinion. But Michigan has so much noise going on that this game is even more important. Because here's the thing. If they lose, you're going to hear the chatter, oh, they weren't stealing signs, they weren't doing this. That stuff just kind of wears on you as a program, I'm sure. You don't want to hear that crap. Penn State, this is their chance to get over the hump. They couldn't do it against Ohio State. Here's another shot at getting over the hump. And I think they don't have the weapons on the outside to beat Michigan, but I think they have a defense to keep it close. I have Michigan winning, but I think that's a very important game in the top 10. And my secondary pick would be the Washington and Utah game. Can Utah slow Washington down at all and make it a rock fight? Can they keep Penix down a little bit? There's a lot of good games this weekend, but my eyes are on those two games right now.
I was about to say another one to throw at you that could hold some importance for conference matchups is USC Oregon. I mean, if Oregon can get this win, I feel like if they get this win, they've kind of secured a spot in the championship game with a rematch versus Washington.
I believe the only thing is they've got a rivalry game to close out the year against Oregon State, which that game right there is going to be a battle to play Washington probably to play Washington in the championship. That that matchup right there could be very big. I just think they have too much for USC because USC, their defense isn't going to be corrected just because they fired the DC. It's going to take an off season, another probably season of struggling for them to really be there. Oregon they're just so damn good, man. They're just so electric. I would be really worried if I got matched up with them potentially in like a 4-1 game. If I was like Ohio State or Michigan or Georgia, one of those teams, however it works out, I'd be very worried if I got matched up against Oregon in any situation like that.
Yeah.
So I think we highlighted it. It's a very important week of games. Very important week. Caleb, let's get into the pick'em realm. We got 10 games this weekend. Let me get them pulled up for us.
I was about to say, while you're getting those pulled up there, so when you look at the Saturday Showdown contest, we've got a 2-way tie for first, a third place, and a 3-way tie for fourth. Where myself, I'm up there in that 3-way tie for fourth, so still up there for that top few spots, trying to save us some prizes. And
we appreciate you.
And then we've got you and Brandon down around the 14-15 spot there.
I missed last week. I just had just so much going on, and I missed to get my picks in. So I've fallen out of contention. But Caleb, we're obviously rooting for you. We need a big week out of you here. Let's get into the games. Game number 1, we just highlighted it. We got Michigan at Penn State. How do you see this one going down?
Yeah, I'm going to go with Michigan in this one. I think they're talented. I think they come out and maybe shut out some of this noise that's been going on and play the game. Because when you look at it, these kids didn't do anything. They're going to go out there and play hard. It's staffing-wise something that they had no control of. So I think they go out there and play hard and keep playing hard to fight for a playoff spot until some rulings made saying maybe they aren't allowed to or whatever. But I think if you're Michigan, you just go out there and keep playing your game.
Yeah, I'm with you. I got Michigan winning this one. I don't know what's got to change at Penn State. They just cannot get over this hump of beating Ohio State or Michigan. I think that continues. Give me Michigan. Yeah, give me Michigan by at least a touchdown. Next game on the – yep, go ahead.
I was just going to say, with Penn State, I think you're seeing some growing pains with a freshman quarterback that, you can't expect him to come in and play like a guy that's been there in that spot before. So, he gets this season under his belt. Maybe they come back more competitive next year.
I think that's a good point. I think that's a good estimation because he is a freshman quarterback. We're expecting a lot out of him. I think that's a solid point by you. Next game, we've got Texas Tech at Kansas. I got to tell you, man, I talked up Kansas to start the year. They dropped a game or two here and there, but 7-2, they're 16th in the country. Do you think they beat Texas Tech?
I think they keep rolling here. They've really seemed to turn this program around from almost being a laughing stock for years to, like you said, they're 7-2 and ranked 16th in the country. I mean, at that point, that's a heck of a turnaround for a team that has been so bad for so long. And now they're actually got a coach in place and a staff in place that is able to make that happen.
Yeah, I'm with you on that one. Give me Kansas. I'm all in on Kansas. I'm not jumping off the bandwagon now. Give me Kansas to win this one. Next game. This is an interesting one. Virginia Tech versus Boston College. Boston College has found their way at 6-3. Virginia Tech 4-5. Give me the Eagles in this one.
Yeah, I think I got to follow you there. It's at a home game for Boston College. Virginia Tech is surprisingly favored by 1.5, so not a very close margin. But I'm like you. I think with it being a home game, I've got to go with Boston College on this one.
Yep, totally with you there. Next one on the agenda, Rutgers versus Iowa, and this is one of the most massive unders in betting history. Give me Rutgers to pull the upset.
Okay, that's interesting. Okay. Yeah. I almost got to go to the flip side of that. I know Iowa doesn't have their quarterback, but they still found their way to 7-2 and 22nd in the country. It is home for them up in Iowa. So give me the Hawkeyes.
I'm surprised by you. I thought you were going upset. Next game on the list, New Mexico State Aggies versus the Western Kentucky Hilltoppers. Based on Vegas, WKU is the favorite, but I'm going New Mexico State.
Yeah, you've got Western Kentucky favored by 5 in this game and over under 55.5, so a lot of points expected in this game. It is a home game for Western Kentucky. When you look at these two teams, it's interesting. They are favored.
Yep.
But I think for now, I've got to go with New Mexico State in this one.
Interesting. I like New Mexico State better. Next game, Texas State Bobcats at 6-3 versus Coastal Carolina Chanticleers at 6-3 also. Give me the Chanticleers.
Yeah, this one's one I've went back and forth on because I've watched both these teams this year. A fantastic job by Texas State head coach. I believe it's his first year, and a game that 2-point spread, 57.5 points.
Yep.
Interesting game. I think I got to follow suit there. Give me Coastal Carolina in this one.
Okay, next one on the agenda. Ooh, this is a big one. The Tennessee Volunteers versus Missouri Tigers, 13 versus 14. I'm taking the Missouri Tigers in this one.
Yeah, this is a tough one that it's taken everything in me not to pick Tennessee, and I picked against Missouri this year, and in some of those games they've showed up. We talked about the Kansas State game. They won it with a big field goal.
Mm-hmm.
Missouri's got something going there in Columbia, and I'll still say it's weird to see them having success. I just don't think Missouri is a very successful program in a sense for football. So, I'll follow you. Give me the Tigers in this one. Maybe I picked them and they somehow end up losing this one. But from what I've seen so far, I'm not sold on Tennessee this year. They had that win in the swamp against Florida, but they've looked up and down so far this season.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I'm going Missouri. I feel good. I feel good about the Missouri. Next game, Oklahoma State versus UCF. Give me Oklahoma State. I got them big in this one. They've been playing good football.
Yeah, I agree with that. I'll take Oklahoma State too. I think ever since they stopped playing, quarterback merry-go-round at the beginning of the year, if they wouldn't have been doing that situation, you may see them with one or two less losses. They're a team that could be much higher in the rankings. But, yeah, like you said, I like Oklahoma State big in this one to come in and just get the win.
Was that the Wyoming game they lost early?
No, I think it was they had that loss to Southern.
Oh, yeah. That was a bad one. Maybe I'm thinking of Baylor or somebody like that. Yeah, that was a bad loss. Next game on the list, a game we talked about, Ole Miss versus Georgia. I'm going to stick with Georgia, but for the sake of fun and content, I would love to see Ole Miss pull an upset.
Yeah, I think this is going to be a potential big game. That 6 o'clock slate on ESPN. Like you, I'm going to go with Georgia just because they found ways to win all of these games this year, even if they're close games. They found a way to pull it out, and I think that's what makes them. You look at them being the two-time defending champions. They find ways to win the game, even though they don't have maybe as dominant of a defense this year or as talented of a offense. With they begin before the year started, they lose their starting running back, they lose their stud tight end and Brock Bowers, and
Yep.
I think Carson Beck's starting to figure it out. So give me the Dogs in this one.
Yeah, I think that's the right pick. Either, just wanting the upset and everything. This one should be I'm surprised that this one. Fresno State 8-1, the Bulldogs versus San Jose State. San Jose State favored by Vegas. Give me Fresno State to cover in this one. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I picked against Fresno State once this season and it didn't go well for me. I like the Dogs in this one to go on the road to California to get the win, and in sunny California, I think, like you said, they cover. The spread's only 1 in this one, so I think they win by at least 1 to 2 touchdowns in this game.
Yep. That's where I'm feeling it too. Caleb, that's all the games to pick this weekend. I'm glad to be back with you. Really enjoyed it. Do you have anything else before we get out of here?
No, just we are winding down to the crunch time of college football. Got some big games coming up in the next few weeks. We've still got the big Michigan Ohio State game. Is that 2 weeks away?
Yeah, it's November 25th or 26th.
Yeah, so we've got a couple more weeks there. You've got a lot of big games coming up in the next few weeks with, conference kind of big conference implications. Mm-hmm. And, who knows? Do we have an upset here or there that could shake things up in the college football playoffs? It'll be interesting to see as the rest of the season unfolds.
We could have one this weekend. I mean, could you imagine just the conversation next week if Ole Miss could pull this off, or if Penn State beats Michigan? I mean, there's some games with some Utah upsets Washington. There's some things that could happen this weekend that could really be topical. I'm looking forward to this weekend's games. Caleb, this has been Saturday Showdown, and we will see you guys next week. Caleb, next time, man.
Yep, we'll see you next week.
All right. Enjoy your guys' night. enjoy football this weekend. We'll see you then.